Out of thousands of videos, we're glad you chose this one. Now sit back and enjoy a gripping revenge story that begins in Newton, a suburb of Boston. My name is Paige Lawson. I am 28 years old, and for most of my life, my parents have had a favorite word for me: stupid. Not lazy, not distracted. Just stupid, said with that little shake of the head that makes you feel smaller than dust on the kitchen floor. I was the kid who forgot dates, mixed up instructions, needed to see and touch things to learn. My sister was the brilliant, beautiful golden child, the one with the perfect transcripts, the polished smile, the future everyone in my family worshipped. When she walked across the stage at her Ivy League graduation, my parents stood up in their seats and clapped like they were in a movie. Later that night, in a ballroom full of champagne glasses and cameras, my dad tapped his glass and announced that everything they owned would go to her one day. The business, the houses, the legacy. I was standing 3 feet away, and it was like he was reading my erasure out loud. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just went quiet in a way that scared even me, because deep down, a small part of me hoped the universe had receipts they did not know about. 4 days later, during a quiet family brunch, a stranger in a dark suit walked in, asked for me by name, and slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check for $30 million and a document that made my parents' faces go white. The room went silent. The air froze. Before I tell you how that envelope blew up my entire family, stay to the end and, if you have ever been called the dumb one, type "I am not stupid" in the comments. I grew up in a nice suburb just outside Boston, in a house with white columns, 2 SUVs in the driveway, and parents who loved reminding me how far below the family standard I was. My dad, Daniel Lawson, ran our coastal hotel company, Lawson Harbor Hospitality. My mom, Margaret, treated that company like her personality, and my older sister, Kennedy, was their walking LinkedIn post. Straight A's, captain of everything, Yale MBA. At every school event, people would say, "Of course she's a Lawson, she's brilliant." Then they would look at me and say, "And this is the little one?" Like they were trying to figure out if I had wandered in from another family. When I forgot a detail or mixed up a schedule, my parents never said, "You'll get it next time." They said, "Paige, how can you be this stupid?" It was always the same tone, tired and embarrassed at the same time. Kennedy got tutors, prep courses, leadership camps in the summer. I got the leftover laptop and a suggestion to try harder. I was not good on paper. I froze on exams. I forgot dates. I got distracted by people's faces instead of the formulas in front of me. What I was good at never counted. I remembered guests. I remembered how they took their coffee, what room they liked, what kind of pillow gave them neck pain. I could calm down a furious customer faster than my dad's managers, but in my parents' eyes, that was just customer service, not real intelligence. The only person who seemed to see something in me was my grandmother, Evelyn Lawson, the woman who actually built Lawson Harbor from a tiny roadside inn in Maine. Every summer, while Kennedy went to expensive camps, my grandmother would take me up to that first inn. It did not look like much from the outside, just a weathered building with blue shutters and a faded sign, but inside it felt alive. She let me shadow her at the front desk, watch her walk the property, listen as she talked to housekeepers and maintenance like they mattered as much as the richest guest. At night, when we were counting receipts in her tiny office, she would say, "You see people, Paige. That is a skill your parents do not understand how to measure." The first time I cried in front of her and asked if I was actually stupid, she laughed. Not at me, but at the question. "You learn differently," she said. "You need to touch things, test them, watch how they work. The world rewards people who look good on paper." I reward people who can keep a guest from leaving angry. When my dad snapped at me in the lobby one day in front of staff, calling me an embarrassment because I mixed up 2 room keys, my grandmother pulled me aside after he left. She shut the office door, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "If they ever show you exactly what they think you are, remember, you always have a choice. You do not have to accept their version of you." At the time, I thought she was just trying to make me feel better. I did not know she was already moving money, signing documents, and writing a plan that would one day land on our brunch table inside a cream envelope and make my parents regret every time they called me stupid. By the time I finished community college, the path for both Lawson daughters seemed obvious to everyone but me. Kennedy went straight into Yale for her MBA, then slid into a sleek glass office at our Boston headquarters as if it had been built for her. I stayed local, worked shifts at a coffee shop, and quietly applied for an entry-level job at Lawson Harbor because my grandmother had once told me, "If you want to learn a business, start where the problems show up." Thanks to a recommendation letter she wrote before she passed, I got hired as an operations coordinator. That sounds fancy. In reality, it meant I was the person people called when something went wrong. Double-booked rooms, broken air conditioners, weddings where the flowers arrived in the wrong color. I was the one on the phone at midnight with a furious bride, a confused front desk clerk, and a night manager who just wanted to go home. I did not design logos or pose for photos with investors like Kennedy. I did the unglamorous work that kept guests from torching us online. My salary was $45,000 a year. Kennedy's was more than $250,000 plus bonuses and stock options, and my parents talked about it like it was proof that God had personally signed her resume. At family dinners, my mom would pull up Kennedy's LinkedIn on her phone and show her latest article or feature. When it came to me, she said things like, "At least you have benefits," in the same tone people use when they talk about a consolation prize. At the office, it was not much better. My dad only spoke to me when something had gone wrong. "Paige, how many times do we have to go over this?" "Paige, our brand cannot afford mistakes." Meanwhile, I watched housekeepers relax when I walked into a room because they knew I would listen instead of barking orders. I watched guests who had sworn they would never come back end up booking their next stay because I remembered their kid's name or the fact that they hate feather pillows. None of that showed up on any spreadsheet my parents cared about. The day everything shifted started like any other. I stayed late at headquarters, trying to sort out a mess at one of our coastal properties where a storm had knocked out power, and a bachelorette party was live posting their misery. It was almost 9:30 when I finally shut down my computer. Most of the building was dark. As I walked past the executive wing toward the elevator, I heard my father's voice from inside the boardroom. I should have kept going. Instead, I stopped. The door was cracked just enough for voices to slip through. "Once Kennedy is fully in place, we cannot keep Paige on," my dad said, his voice flat. "She is not executive material. Frankly, she makes us look bad." My mother's voice followed, calm and cold. "She is nice with guests, but nice does not run companies, Daniel. We gave her a job. That is more than enough." Another voice, the head of HR, asked something I could not catch, and my dad answered, "A small severance, a recommendation letter, and we are done. No place for dead weight when we are trying to scale." I felt my face burn, my palms go numb. They were not talking about my performance. They were talking about me, like I was a broken chair cluttering the lobby. I backed away before anyone could see me, took the stairs down, and drove home with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. An hour later, sitting on my bed in my tiny apartment, my work email pinged. It was from HR. The subject line was organizational changes. The first line said my role would be phased out by the end of the summer. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I remembered my grandmother's voice in that little office at the inn, telling me I would always have a choice if they ever showed me who they really were. For the first time in my life, I believed her. I just did not know yet how that choice was going to explode at a celebration my family had already planned without me. The celebration my family planned without me turned out to be bigger than most weddings. It was held 2 weeks later at a luxury hotel in downtown Boston, the kind of place where the valet guys wear white gloves and the chandeliers look like they cost more than my entire yearly salary. It was supposed to be a party for Kennedy's Yale graduation and official welcome as the future of Lawson Harbor. That was the wording on the embossed invitations anyway. I only knew because I saw a stack of them on my parents' kitchen counter with little gold ribbons tied around each one. Mine didn't come in the mail. My mother texted me the details like it was an obligation. Black tie. Try not to be late. When I walked into the ballroom that night, the first thing I saw was a giant screen looping photos of Kennedy. Kennedy in a cap and gown. Kennedy giving a presentation. Kennedy shaking hands with some professor whose name I did not know. Underneath each photo was a caption about leadership, excellence, vision. I scanned the slideshow out of habit, looking for my face, and of course, it wasn't there. It never was. I wore a simple black dress I had found on sale at a department store clearance rack. The tag had said $89, marked down from $200. My mom looked me up and down once, said, "At least it's not too loud," and then turned back to a group of women talking about summering on the Cape. I ended up at a table near the back with a couple of junior managers and their dates. Whenever someone walked past and recognized my last name, they yanked their face into a polite smile and asked, "So you must be Kennedy's sister. What do you do again?" Before I could answer, they would remember an email or a drink or someone more important to talk to. After dinner, my dad walked onto the small stage, tapped his glass with a fork, and waited until the room quieted around him. "Tonight," he said, "is about the future." He talked about Kennedy's degrees, her brilliance, her work ethic. He talked about how Lawson Harbor started as a roadside inn and how it was now a multi-property brand. Then he smiled in a way I recognized from investor meetings and said, "And I'm proud to announce that when the time comes, the Lawson legacy, our assets, our properties, everything we have built, will be entrusted to Kennedy." People clapped. Some stood. A few whistled. My mom wiped a tear like she was in a commercial. My name did not come up once. Standing near the back of the room, I felt something inside me go very still. It wasn't shock. It wasn't even fresh hurt. It was a kind of cold clarity, the kind you get when someone finally says out loud the thing you have always felt. To them, I wasn't just the stupid one. I was the disposable one. Kennedy turned toward the crowd, smiling, soaking up the attention. For a moment, our eyes met across the room. She hesitated, just slightly, then looked away. Later that night, while the DJ played and people danced under soft lights, I slipped out to the terrace and looked over the city I had grown up in, the city my family thought they owned. Somewhere out there was the little inn in Maine where my grandmother had taught me how to read people, not spreadsheets. Somewhere in my apartment was the cream envelope she had once placed in my hands and told me to open only when I saw my parents clearly. As my father's voice floated out through the open doors, bragging about the next hotel expansion, I realized something simple and terrifying. That moment had finally come. Family brunch at my parents' house in Newton was the kind of thing they treated like a performance. Perfectly stacked pancakes, fruit arranged like a magazine cover, my mom in a linen apron she never actually cooked in. I almost didn't go that Sunday. After the graduation party, after hearing my dad promise our entire legacy to Kennedy in front of a ballroom of strangers, the idea of sitting at their kitchen island pretending everything was normal made my skin crawl. But something about my grandmother's voice in my head, that sentence about seeing who they really are, pushed me out the door. When I walked in, my parents were already mid-monologue about expansion plans. Kennedy sat at the counter scrolling through her phone, laughing at something in a group chat. No one noticed I was there until my mom glanced up and said, "Oh good, you made it. Grab a plate." Like I was the neighbor's kid. I poured myself coffee, tried to stay small at the end of the island. My dad started talking about how the Yale Alumni Network was going to be huge for the brand. "We're about to play in a different league," he said, clapping Kennedy on the shoulder. "People take us more seriously now." I was cutting into a piece of waffle I couldn't taste when the doorbell rang. My mom frowned. "We're not expecting anyone," she said, wiping her hands and walking toward the foyer. A moment later, I heard a man's voice, low and professional. My mom called back, "Daniel. He says he's here for Paige." Every head turned toward me like someone had said my name at a crime scene. A man in a dark suit stepped into the kitchen. He was in his 50s, with a leather briefcase and the kind of calm you only see in people who deal with disasters for a living. "Paige Lawson?" he asked. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "Yeah, that's me." He nodded once. "My name is Jordan Price. I'm an attorney. Your grandmother, Evelyn Lawson, retained me several years ago. She left instructions for me to deliver something to you once certain conditions were met." My dad's jaw tightened. "Evelyn's affairs were handled years ago," he said. "We've already probated her estate. There's nothing left to—" Jordan didn't even look at him. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick cream envelope with my name handwritten across the front in my grandmother's looping cursive. My heart stopped. I knew that handwriting. I had seen it on post-it notes on her office wall, on the birthday cards she slipped me $50 bills in. He slid the envelope across the island until it was directly in front of me. "She asked that you open this in front of your immediate family," he said. "Today." The room felt suddenly too bright. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside, on top, was a cashier's check. I had never held one before, but even I knew they did not print $30 million on just anything. For a second, I thought I had misread the zeros. $30 million. Not 300,000. Not 3 million. 30. My mom made a strangled noise. My dad reached for the check and Jordan stepped smoothly between them. "That belongs to Paige," he said evenly. "It's drawn from Ms. Lawson's personal investment accounts, fully separate from company assets." Under the check was a stapled packet of legal documents. On the top page, in bold, were the words, "Last Will and Testament of Evelyn Grace Lawson, dated 2 years before she died." My eyes found the section Jordan had highlighted in yellow. It said that upon her death, 51% of Lawson Harbor Hospitality, including all associated voting rights, would pass directly to her granddaughter, Paige Lawson. Me. There was a paragraph explaining why. Evelyn talked about watching me work with guests, about seeing how my parents dismissed me, about wanting the person who valued people over spreadsheets to control the company's future. She wrote in her own words, "Paige has been treated as the stupid one. She is not. She has been abandoned emotionally by those who benefited from my work. I will not abandon her in death." My dad's face went from red to gray in seconds. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "She was not well at the end. She must have been confused." Jordan calmly flipped to the last page where my grandmother's signature sat next to a doctor's letter confirming she was of sound mind when she signed. "This will was executed with full capacity," he said. "It supersedes any prior documents." Kennedy's fork clattered onto her plate. "So what does this mean?" she asked, voice thin. Jordan turned back to me. "It means you are now the majority shareholder of Lawson Harbor Hospitality," he said. "But there is a condition. Your grandmother wanted to give you a choice, not a burden. From the moment you receive this envelope, you have 5 days to formally notify the board and call for a special meeting. If you do, this will take full effect, and you inherit controlling interest, along with the funds in that check. which she set aside so you would never be financially dependent on your parents. He paused. If you choose not to act within those 5 days, this document becomes void, and the previous estate plan remains in place. In plain English, if I stayed quiet like I had my whole life, everything would go back to the way my parents wanted it. My dad found his voice again. This is insane. Paige, you are not a business person. You can't possibly think you're going to… What? Run a company? He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just panic. My mom stared at the check like she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. Just give it back, she whispered. We'll figure it out as a family. For years, that word, family, had been the hook they used to pull me back into line. Family when they needed me to work holidays. Family when they needed me to cover for their mistakes. Family when they wanted me quiet. Now it sounded more like a threat than a comfort. I looked down at my name on the check, at my grandmother's handwriting on the envelope, at the paragraph where she called me out by my real strengths for the first time in my life. My hands were still shaking, but something inside me stopped shaking altogether. What happens if I call the meeting? I asked Jordan. He met my eyes. Then we let the board see who really built this company, he said, and we let the truth do what it was always going to do. 5 days. One envelope, $30 million I never asked for, and a decision that would either keep me in the role I'd always played or finally make my parents choke on the word they'd used for me my entire life. For the first time, I was not sure who I was more afraid for, me or them. The first 24 hours after the brunch felt like I was walking around in someone else's life. I put the check and the will back in the envelope, and Jordan followed me to my apartment to lock everything in a small fireproof safe he'd brought with him. You don't flash a target like this around, he said. Before he left, he set a thin USB drive on my kitchen table. Your grandmother asked me to give you this only if you chose to act, he said. If you're serious about calling that meeting, watch what's on here. When he was gone, my phone lit up nonstop. My dad called 5 times, then texted, "Don't do anything rash." My mom sent a paragraph about how families should work things out privately. Kennedy texted once, "We need to talk." Then nothing when I didn't respond. I ignored all of them and plugged the USB into my laptop. There were copies of old board minutes, partnership agreements, and one audio file labeled simply, January 2020. When I hit play, I heard my grandmother's voice first, calm but tired, asking why the bylaws were being rewritten without her. Then my dad's voice, sharp, saying things like, "You're not up to speed on modern hospitality," and "We can't let an 80-year-old hold back growth." He talked about streamlining voting rights. My grandmother said quietly, "So you want my name on the letterhead but not my vote in the room?" My mother chimed in at one point, calling resistance sentimental. The recording ended with a scrape of chairs and my grandmother saying, "All right, I see who you are." I sat there listening to it twice, my stomach twisting. This was not just about them underestimating me. They had tried to sideline the woman who built everything they stood on. No wonder she'd moved her investments and changed her will. I opened my email and stared at a blank message addressed to Jordan. All I had to type was one sentence. I want to call the meeting. My hands hovered over the keys for a long time. If I did nothing, the will would vanish. The money and control would revert to the plan my parents wanted, and my life would go back to be grateful for whatever they give you. I would lose my job, watch Kennedy inherit everything, and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I hadn't been so scared. The truth settled in my chest like a weight. Staying quiet was also a choice. It was just a choice I'd been making my entire life. I typed the sentence and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Within an hour, Jordan called. "Good," he said. "We've got 3 business days. Here's what happens next." He walked me through the process, As majority shareholder, I could demand a special meeting, but he wanted allies on the board to avoid a circus. He suggested two names, Clara Nguyen, an early investor who had been with my grandmother since the first expansion, and Samuel Ortiz, a hospitality veteran who had clashed with my dad over cutting staff. They both respected Evelyn, he said. If they see this will and hear that recording, they'll understand. My heart pounded as I dialed Clara's number. I had only met her a few times at events. She answered on the second ring. I introduced myself, stumbled through a summary, then offered to send the documents. There was a long pause. Then she said, Evelyn told me once that you were the only one in your generation who understood guests. Send everything. If it's real, I'll stand with you. Samuel was more skeptical, but when he heard my parents on the recording, he exhaled like something he'd suspected was finally confirmed. Your father's ego has been a problem for a long time, he said. Your grandmother trusted me. I won't ignore that. By the end of the second day, Jordan had formal signatures from both of them supporting the special meeting. Formal notices went out to the full board. The subject line was like a spark in a room full of dry paper. Special meeting called by majority shareholder Lawson Harbor Hospitality. My dad blew up my phone again, this time not bothering with nice words. He accused Jordan of manipulating me, called the will a tantrum from a confused old woman, told me I was going to ruin everything out of spite. For the first time, I did not rush to defend myself or explain. I texted back one sentence, "We'll talk in the boardroom." The night before the meeting, I laid everything out on my kitchen table, the check, copies of the will, a transcript of the audio, bullet points of what I wanted to say. I was not trying to sound like a CEO. I just wanted to sound like someone who finally believed her own story. When the sun came up, I put on the only blazer I owned, tied my hair back, and looked at myself in the mirror. My parents still thought I was walking into that building as the stupid one. They had no idea the girl they'd always underestimated was about to walk into the boardroom holding the one thing they never believed she'd have: the power to decide what happened to them. The morning of the meeting, I walked into Lawson Harbor's headquarters with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The receptionists, who usually barely looked up when I passed, actually stared this time, because I was not in my usual polo and flats. I was in a blazer, carrying a leather folder and walking like I had somewhere specific to be. My dad was waiting outside the boardroom, red-faced, phone in hand. "We are not doing this," he hissed under his breath as I approached. "You are going to walk in there, tell them you're overwhelmed, and we'll fix this as a family." The word family hit different now. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "We'll let the board hear everything and decide what's best for the company. That's what real leaders do, right?" For a second, something like fear flashed across his face. Then the doors opened and there was no more time to argue. Inside, the board members sat around a long, polished table, coffee cups and printed agendas in front of them. Clara and Samuel nodded to me when I took my seat beside Jordan. My mom and Kennedy sat off to the side, looking like they were at a funeral they hadn't planned for. My dad tried to open the meeting with a speech about unfortunate confusion, but Clara cut him off. "This meeting was called by the majority shareholder," she said. "We will hear from her first." The room shifted. Every eye turned to me. For a second, the old panic rose in my throat. The same feeling I used to get when a teacher called on me and I had no idea what page we were on. But then I thought of my grandmother at that tiny inn in Maine, handing me guest comment cards and saying, "Just tell the truth about what happened and how you fixed it." So I did. I told them about summers at the inn, about how Evelyn built Lawson Harbor by caring more about people than margins. I slid the check and the will across the table, letting them see the numbers for themselves. Jordan walked them through the legal pieces, the dates, the doctor's letter. Then I played the recording from 2020, the one where my dad tried to strip my grandmother of her vote while keeping her name on the brand. Hearing his voice say she was too old and too sentimental made several people around the table physically flinch. My dad sputtered, tried to spin it as taken out of context, but the context was just too clear. When it was over, I looked each board member in the eye and said, as steadily as I could, "My grandmother trusted you to protect this company. She trusted me to protect what it stands for. I am not here to punish anyone. I am here to ask if you still believe the person who said those things should lead Lawson Harbor." No one spoke for a long moment. Then Samuel cleared his throat. "I move for a vote of no confidence in Daniel Lawson as CEO," he said. The motion was seconded before my dad could object. One by one, hands went up around the table. No confidence, no confidence, no confidence. My dad watched the room turn on him in real time, all the power he had taken for granted slipping out of his hands like sand. In the end, only 2 people voted to keep him. It wasn't close. By the terms of the bylaws he had been so eager to rewrite, he was given 30 days to step down. Kennedy's position as heir apparent evaporated with him. The board decided that any leadership role she wanted going forward would have to be earned, not inherited. In the months that followed, the fallout hit every part of my parents' lives. Without my dad's salary and perks, and with certain loans being called in now that investors knew there had been internal conflict, my parents had to sell the Newton house and move into something smaller and quieter. Invitations to the fancy galas and charity balls dried up. People who once fought for a seat at my dad's table suddenly had other plans. As for me, the board did not hand me the CEO title, and I did not ask for it. Instead, they created a new role based on my grandmother's notes, Director of Guest Experience and Culture. My job was to rebuild what had been slowly eroded under all the gloss, to retrain managers on how to treat staff and guests like actual humans again. It was the first title I had ever had that felt like it fit. Kennedy reached out after a while, not to demand anything, but to apologize. She admitted she had heard some of the things my parents said about me, and had chosen to stay quiet because it benefited her. I didn't forgive her on the spot, but I listened. Real change takes more than one teary conversation, and I finally understood it was okay to take my time. I set boundaries with my parents, too. I met them for coffee occasionally, but I did not let them yell or guilt me into decisions. Whenever they slipped back into old patterns, I ended the conversation and left. That, more than any board vote, was the real revenge. I stopped needing their approval to feel like I mattered. Looking back, the wildest part of all of this is not the $30 million or the boardroom drama. It is the fact that for years I believed them when they called me stupid. I let people who valued the wrong things decide what I was worth. My grandmother knew better. She saw that there are different kinds of intelligence, and the one that can't be measured on a transcript is often the one that actually keeps a business, a family, a life, from falling apart. If you grew up being called the dumb one, the lazy one, the problem, here is what I learned. Sometimes the people who say those things are just afraid of the parts of you they can't control. Your worth is not a grade or a job title or where your name does or doesn't show up in a speech. It is how you treat people when no one is watching, and how you choose yourself even when it disappoints the ones who taught you not to. My parents thought a stupid girl could never hold their future in her hands. They were right about one thing. I am not the girl they raised anymore. I am the woman who finally believed she deserved better. And once I did, there was nothing they could do to stop everything they built on top of me from collapsing. Our team at Revenge Argonne is dedicated to creating powerful, meaningful storylines that explore family dynamics, choices, and consequences. We promise that this is a work of fiction, crafted solely to share valuable life lessons and educational messages with our viewers, not to target or reflect any real person or event. In this story, the villains aren't cartoon monsters. They're parents and a sister who let ego, status, and favoritism matter more than basic respect and love. They only start to regret it when power and money slip out of their hands, not when Paige is hurting. If you were in Paige's position, how would you deal with them? Would you cut them off completely, forgive them slowly, or keep your distance but still stay connected?